Welcome to another quiet passage through time, here with the unsleeping historian. Tonight, let us drift together toward the ragged edge of the American frontier. Imagine a place far removed from the rhythms of modern life, a place built not on peace or permanence, but on dreams of sudden riches and whispered promises of gold glinting in the mountain streams. We are journeying to the year 18 and the years that followed, when thousands upon thousands flooded westward in a feverish pursuit of one elusive thing, the gold rush. Yet beneath the shimmering surface of fortune lies a much harsher reality, one of mud-caked boots, frost-numbed fingers, hollow stomachs, and hopes slowly ground down like stone in a sluice box. Tonight, you'll walk in the footsteps of the hopeful and the hopeless. You'll feel the weight of their tools, hear the cough of distant campfires, and sense the loneliness that settled in with the cold. You'll meet a man who rose above it all on the backs of those laboring beneath him, and you'll see what becomes of places built on dreams when the dreaming stops. We begin, as always, at ground level, in the quiet, repetitive, humbling routines of daily life. Let your eyes grow heavy, your thoughts grow still, and allow yourself to wander to the riverside shanty camps of California's gold rush. Segment 1. As a 49er, the silted dreams of the gold. Picture, if you will, the faint first light of dawn rising over a narrow creek in the Sierra Nevada foothills. The earth is damp, the air is sharp, with the cold of the highlands, and mist clings to the surface of the water like a secret. A man stands there alone, ankle deep in the stream. His boots are worn, his fingers are red and stiff. He bends, slowly, again, and again, and again, to swirl a tin pan through muddy water. He is one of tens of thousands known as 49ers, named for the year when the gold rush truly exploded. He is here, like all the others, chasing a glint or shimmer of fortune promised and rarely delivered. His hands tremble, not from excitement, but from the cold. For hour upon hour, he stands in that water, rocking his pan side to side, coaxing out flecks of gold from sand and gravel. Most days yield nothing. Occasionally, a dusting. Rarely, a nugget. Always, a toll on the body. Panning is not glamorous. It is slow, aching work. The pan must be moved gently enough to keep the lighter material swirling, but steady enough not to lose what little gold may be hidden in the grit. It is an act of patience and quiet desperation, and he is never truly alone. All around him, in this scattered camp of tents and timber shacks, other men toil just the same. Some dig deeper into the hills, hacking at rock faces with pick. Others have graduated to sluice boxes and cradles, contraptions meant to separate gold more efficiently, though they require ever more water, ever more effort. The work is back-breaking, sunburnt shoulders in summer frostbitten, and even if gold is found, the reward may not last. In these camps, supplies are scarce and expensive. A single egg might sell for the price of a workman's daily wage. A pair of boots, perhaps imported all the way from Boston or St. Louis, could cost what back home would buy a small plot of land. Inflation, driven by demand and desperation, inflates the price of even the simplest comfort to absurdity. Meat is tough and salted, bread often moldy, vegetables rare. The men grow thin, or else bloated from lack of nourishment. Scurvy is a constant companion, a slow, bleeding reminder of vitamin-starved days. In camp, there is little rest. Nights are not silent. Men gamble away what little they have, argue over disputed claims, drink bad whiskey brewed from whatever is at hand. A single heated word might bring fists, or worse. There is no real law here, only the threat of a shovel in the night. Diseases run through the tents as swiftly as the rivers run through the valleys. Dysentery, typhoid, fevers that steal strength and memory. There are few doctors, and fewer medicines. Death is neither unusual nor particularly remarked upon. Men simply vanish, their claim taken by another. And yet, the camps grow. New faces arrive weekly, dusty from the overland trail, or sunburnt from the Pacific voyage. Many are barely more than boys. Some are old men with eyes full of fire. Others are immigrants from China, Mexico, Chile, and Australia, each bringing new methods in facing discrimination for them. Imagine the campfire smoke hanging low in the valley, mixed with the smell of sweat, wet canvas, and the ever-present taps of river silt. The rhythm of their lives is steady. Dig, pan, eat, sleep, repeat. Each sunrise a fresh chance, each sunset a quiet resignation. Among them are dreamers, scoundrels, the devout, and the broken. They write letters home that speak of golden hills and bountiful finds, rarely telling the full story. Because to admit the truth, to say "I have found nothing," is to admit defeat. There are fortunes made, yes, but they are rare, and they are often quickly lost. A lucky strike might fund a season of pleasure in San Francisco's gambling halls, only to send the prospector back, broke again, before the year is out. Others lose everything without ever finding a single flake. By the end of their journey, many have only their tools, their calloused hands, and the memories of cold creeks and distant hopes. They do not strike gold, but something strikes them. A realization, quiet and steady as the river itself, that the dream was always just out of reach. Still, the rhythm continues. A shovel bites into soil, a pan dips into water, a man peers at the silt, searching for that familiar shimmer, and far above the river, the first stars begin to appear, quiet, distant, unconcerned, just as they always have. Segment 2. The Empire of Leland Stanford. Rails of ambition as the last campfire embers fade and the hush of the valley deepens. Let us shift our gaze not downward into the silted waters of the Gulf, but upward, along the rising iron veins of a new dream. Imagine, if you will, a different figure, not hunched in a cold creek, but seated at a polished desk, the sleeves of his coat neatly pressed, the buttons of his waistcoat gleaming faintly in the lamplight. This man is not chasing gold in the dirt. He is building something far more enduring, an empire upon rails. His name is Leland Stanford. To understand how he rose, we must first step back to the crossroads of fortune and foresight. Born in 1824 in the wooded hills of upstate New York, Stanford was not always a man of grandeur. As a young man, Leland tried his hand at law, but it was business, opportunity, and movement that called to him. When gold fever swept the country, he too headed west, not with a pickaxe, but with plows and dry goods. He arrived in California not as a prospector, but as a merchant. His brothers helped establish a successful store, selling to the very men we met desperate, in need of tools, flour, boots, and hope in sackcloth. Stanford watched, listened, and learned. He understood the rhythms of desire and supply, and he learned that the real wealth of the West was not dug from the ground but built atop it. In the 1860s, an even more transformative vision began to crystallize. A railroad that would stretch from the Atlantic to the Pacific, a vast, nearly unimaginable feat of engineering and organization. A railroad that would shrink the nation and stitch together its farthest coasts. Stanford, by then a man of increasing political and financial weight, became one of the Big Four, a quartet of Sacramento businessmen who would bankroll and direct the Central Pacific Railroad. Alongside Collis Huntington, Charles Crocker, and Mark Hopkins, he would pour money, strategy, and ambition into the bones of a new American dream. But this dream, too, had its costs. The Central Pacific Railroad faced daunting geography: Sierra Nevada range, towering peaks, snowbound passes, treacherous rock. Progress was slow. The labor was brutal. Men died by the dozens, sometimes by the hundreds. Avalanches buried tracks. Blasting powder turned mountainsides into deadly clouds of stone. To meet the demand for workers, Stanford and his partners turned to a new labor source: Chinese immigrants. Thousands came fleeing poverty, war, and hunger, seeking wages and stability. They brought with them discipline, endurance, and a quiet, relentless work ethic. They were paid less. They were given the most dangerous tasks. They tunneled through solid granite, often suspended from ropes, chipping away with hand tools and primitive explosives. In winter, snow buried entire camps. In summer, the heat was unyielding. Yet still they worked miles at a time, inching forward through the mountains. Stanford would later credit their labor publicly, but only after the line was completed. Imagine the contrast. At one end, thousands of men in canvas tents, waking to another day of frost and dynamite. At the other, Stanford was shaking hands with politicians, sitting for portraits. Speaking of destiny, he served as governor of California during the war years. He cultivated the image of a benevolent leader, even while his wealth multiplied. His interests expanded into banking, into politics, and eventually into education. His wife, Jane, had long harbored dreams beyond profit. The death of their only child, Leland Jr., at the age of 15, would reorient the couple's legacy. In his memory, they would found a university on the very land once crisscrossed by the ambitions of fortune seekers. Leland Stanford Jr. University was conceived as a gift to California's future, an institution built not on gold or rail ties, but on knowledge. And yet, the contradictions linger. Stanford's fortune was built atop the hopes of thousands of miners who spent their lives in creeks and canyons, seeking what he profited from selling to them. His railroad was forged by men who rarely saw the towns their labor connected. The rewards flowed upward. He was not alone. The Gilded Age was full of such men, visionaries who shaped a nation, but whose visions often crushed those beneath them. Still, in the cool hush of hindsight, we can acknowledge the complexity. Imagine the first time the iron rails touched the dust of Promontory Summit in Utah. The great engine, one from the east, one from the west, finally facing each other across a narrow divide. The golden spike driven in with ceremony, a symbol of unity, of power, of progress. And somewhere, far removed from the fanfare, the laborers rested calloused, unsung, and forgotten. Leland Stanford would die in 1893, a man of enormous wealth and reputation. His legacy lives on in stone libraries, in tracks that still hum with movement, and in the whispered memory of what it truly took to bind a continent. Progress, like gold, is never free. And so, we turn now. From men who built empires, to the places those empires left behind. The empty towns, the forgotten rooms, the whispers in the walls. Segment 3. The archaeology of ghost towns. Echoes in the dust. There is a stillness that settles over abandoned places, a silence, not of sleep, but of something ended. Let us wander now, carefully, slowly, into one of those quiet places left behind. Bodie, California. The sun is high, the wind dry and persistent. The wooden slats of forgotten buildings groan gently in its touch. There are no footfalls, no conversation, only the hush of wind through windowless frames. And yet, if you truly listen, you might hear more. The faint creak of a forgotten rocking chair, the clink of a glass from a long-vanished saloon, a whisper in the dust. Ghost towns, places once pulsing with life, now suspended in time. They are the remnants of a cycle boom and bust that defined the American West. Gold, silver, even borax would draw hundreds, sometimes thousands, to a patch of wilderness. Within weeks, tents sprang up. Within months, stores, saloons, schools, and newspapers. And then, just as quickly, the silence. In the case of Bodie, gold was discovered in the late 1850s, but it wasn't until the late 1870s that a true boom began. At its height, Bodie may have housed nearly 10,000 souls. A bustling town with dozens of saloons, a Chinatown, churches, boarding houses, and brothels. It was, by all accounts, wild, a popular phrase of the time. Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie. And then, decline. The mines dried, the investors left, the winters grew too harsh. The promise faded. Today, Bodie stands in what is known as a state of arrested decay. Its structures are preserved, not restored. Dust lies thick on shelves, clothing still hangs in closets, and rust creeps quietly along metal bed springs. As though time simply paused. For archaeologists and historians, ghost towns like Bodie are precious archives, not of kings and treaties but of lives once lived. Let us step, gently, into one of those homes. The wooden floor creaks softly beneath your feet. Sunlight filters through faded curtains, casting long slats of light across a tin basin and a warped dining table. A single porcelain cup still sits on the shelf, its painted edges worn. There are boots by the door, a child's chair near the hearth. It is easy to imagine the heat of the stove, the scratch of wool, the laughter of neighbors through thin walls. Archaeology here is not just about digging, it is about reading the clues left behind in layers of dust and rust. An ink bottle on a desk suggests literacy. Imported china points to trade. A pair of spectacles, mended with wire, reveals the ingenuity of frontier life. Even the placement of buildings tells stories. Saloons often occupied the most central locations, signifying their role as communal hubs. Chinatown, often marginalized, lay on the edge of town, evidence of both inclusion and segregation. The cemeteries tell another story still. Tombstones with faded names, uneven rows, and heartbreak etched in granite. Many graves belong to infants, and children are a reminder of the fragility of life in these hard places. Others bear only initials or simple markers, their stories untold. Some towns, like Bodie, are protected. Others, lost to fire, vandalism, or time, exist only as memories, scattered shards of pottery, collapsed mines, and place names on faded maps. But the stories persist. In one town, archaeologists found a collection of prosthetic limbs and orthopedic devices, evidence of a mining accident or perhaps a traveling doctor's trade. In another, an unassuming shack contained dozens of newspapers from around the globe, hinting at the wide-reaching curiosity of its occupant. Even trash tells tales. Tin cans with bullet holes suggest target practice. Glass bottles burned in old fire pits reveal social habits. In one camp, broken piano keys were found among the rubula, a reminder that even in hardship, music endured. And then, there are the legends. Whispers passed from generation to generation. Some say that Bodhi is haunted not by horror, but by memory. Visitors speak of footsteps in empty halls, rocking chairs that sway on still days, and faint strains of music from the old saloon. The Bodhi curse, as it's called, warns that removing artifacts from the town brings misfortune. So powerful is this belief that rangers at the state park regularly receive mailed packages, items returned anonymously, accompanied by apologetic letters. Whether truth or folklore, these stories add texture to the past. They remind us that places are more than structures. They are echoes of emotion, aspiration, struggle. Imagine now, nightfall in one of these ghost towns. The sky spreads wide overhead, vast and speckled with stars. The wind settles, the buildings, empty of people, still cast long shadows. And though no one lives here now, the rhythm of their lives, their hopes, their meal, their music still hums beneath the silence. It is in that silence that history lingers, not in grand declarations, but in the everyday. The spoon left on the stove, the child's shoe under the bed, the love letters never sent. Ghost towns are not empty. They are full of what remains. Segment 4. The civilizing influence of the pioneer woman. Grass among the grit. As the morning mists of the ghost towns recede, and the wind stills its whispering voice, let us turn now to a gentler rhythm, one shaped not by gold pans or gun smoke, but by hands that swept porches, stitched hems, and stirred bread dough beside iron stoves. The American West is so often remembered for its violence, its wildness, its fiercely masculine energy. But behind and often ahead of the men who toiled in the rivers and blasted mountains were women, resilient, resourceful, and quietly revolutionary. Let us walk for a while in their footsteps. Imagine a small structure at the edge of a mining town, not a saloon or a say office, but a one-room schoolhouse. The boards are clean and whitewashed, its bell hung with care. Inside, rows of desks await students, some barefoot, some rough around the edges, all hoping for something more than gold. At the head of the room stands a woman. She might be no more than 20. Her dress is simple, her hair pinned back, her expression both firm and kind. She has traveled hundreds of miles, often alone, to bring a sense of order and knowledge to a town not yet ready for either. She is a teacher, a civilizer, a pioneer. These women arrived in gold rush boomtowns, not as adventurers, but as architects of community. Some came with husbands following prospectors, merchants, blacksmiths. Others came in search of work, purpose, or escape. A few arrived with only their children and a trunk of belongings. What they found were settlements that were more chaos than community, filled with men, money, and mayhem, but few institutions of stability. It was the women who changed that. Schools were built at their urging. Churches were organized in borrowed saloons. Sewing circles doubled as town councils. Sunday socials became the first community events. Slowly, gently, these frontier women carved civility from the wilderness, not by force, but by persistence. Imagine a boarding house run by a widow. She rises before dawn to bake biscuits, draw water, sweep floors, and mend clothes. Her boarders are men roughened by work and loss, many who barely speak at mealtime. And yet, in her small home, there is warmth, a lace doily on the windowsill, a Bible by the stove, a clock ticking in the quiet evenings. She is not famous. Her name is not written in the history books, but her influence is stitched into every life she touched. Then there were the entrepreneurial women, hoteliers, shopkeepers. Many discovered that where men rushed to spend, women could quietly build wealth. One such woman, known simply as Mary Ellen Pleasant, became a legendary figure in San Francisco. Though her story began in servitude, she used the gold rush era to fund abolitionist efforts and accumulate property, operating behind the scenes with strategy and subtlety. Others, like Clara Brown, a formerly enslaved woman who became a philanthropist in Colorado, used their earnings to reunite families and support churches, hospitals, and schools. Their legacies are quieter, perhaps, but no less profound. And in boomtowns, where the gender imbalance was staggering sometimes as extreme as 20 men for every woman. The mere presence of women reshaped social expectations. Towns that once saw nightly brawls and open vice gradually developed codes of conduct, expectations of decency, and even, in time, courtship rituals. But life for these women was not easy. They bore children in drafty cabins, far from midwives or doctors. They fetched water in winter storms, chopped wood when husbands failed to return, and mourned quietly by candlelight. Letters home were long in coming, and loneliness pressed heavy in the silence between chores. And yet, they endured. They sewed banners for temperance societies. They taught reading by firelight. They planted gardens in rocky soil, coaxing color from a barren land. They formed libraries, reading circles, and suffrage clubs even, when most around them believed their voices should remain unheard. Their strength was not in conquest, but in cultivation. In time, the towns changed. Wooden sidewalks replaced muddy trails. Schools expanded. Courthouses were built. And behind those changes, almost always, were women organizing fundraisers, rallying neighbors, and reminding their communities of what permanence could look like. Picture now, in the fading twilight, a woman on the porch of a modest home. Her hands are folded in her lap. Her dress is patched but clean. She watches the sun set behind the ridge, where once men shouted and horses kicked up clouds of gold dust. It is quieter now. The saloons have closed. The children sleep in narrow beds. A pot of beans simmers on the stove. Tomorrow, there'll be more sewing, more teaching, more listening, and slowly, steadily, the rhythm of her life continues. The West was not just won by men with rifles and railroads. It was steadied by women with brooms and books, pies and petitions. In the hush of history, their footsteps are soft but sure. And as we return now from the boomtowns, the boardrooms, and the burial grounds, let us remember that civilization is not always a grand act. Sometimes it is a quiet one. And now, dear listener, we come gently to the close of our journey. From the cold creeks of the Sierra Nevada, to the corridors of power, from the wind-blown ruins of forgotten towns, to the soft-lit homes built by steady hands, we have walked together through the Golden West. But as the dust settles and the lanterns are dimmed, what lingers is not the shimmer of gold, nor the clang of iron rails, but the quieter truths buried beneath them. The gold rush promised wealth, but delivered exhaustion. It inspired movement, but scattered communities. It birthed cities and emptied them just as quickly. In its wake, it left fortunes. Yes, but also empty cradles, broken claims, and dreams worn thin. It left stories. Stories of those who panned until their fingers cracked and found nothing. Of those who built empires with smiling faces and ruthless hands. Of those who sang to their children beside cast-iron stoves, while the mountains slept in silence. And though the towns faded, and the mines fell silent, and the maps changed, still, something remains. A footprint in the dust. A letter in a desk drawer. A single earring beneath the floorboards. History is not only the grand sweep of events, but the slow, quiet rhythm of lives once lived. Of ordinary people, in extraordinary circumstances, doing what they could with what they had. Tonight, as you rest, you may find your thoughts drifting, gently, to those hills, those cabins, those long and winding trails. You may imagine the flicker of a campfire under stars that look much the same today as they did then, or the soft sound of a school bell echoing across the morning air. Let that rhythm soothe you now. Let the past settle over you like a woolen blanket weathered, a little frayed, but warm. Let the ache and ambition of the gold seekers fade into the hush of sleep. Let the clamor of the towns, the trains, the talk, dissolve into quiet. And know that even in the dustiest corners of history, there is meaning, there is memory, there is life. Thank you for joining me on this long, slow walk through the past. Until next time, sleep well.